Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on robotic process automation in life sciences. I am your host, Shelly. I lead the marketing team for Nivitas. Now, before we get started, let me share a few housekeeping points quickly. If you experience any technical difficulties, please share it via question window on the control panel. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, and you need to again use the same window to post your questions. You will receive the recording of the session after we end the webinar. All right, so let me begin the session by welcoming our speakers, Alan Hester, who is the president at Nivitas, and John Coggan, who is the head of innovation and chief technology officer at Canapps. Welcome, both of you.
Thanks, Shaylee. Good to be here today.
Thank you, Shelley.
Great. So before I hand over to Alan and John, let me share a quick overview and background of both the organizations. Starting with Nivitas. Nivitas has been in existence for about 7 years. The team has deep roots in product engineering and software development with an emphasis on digital process automation. We are operating out of multiple offices in the US and India. Our two co-founders have come from Savient. They were involved in developing the product and running the company as well. We have a large team of engineers who have various areas of expertise and are working on a wide range of customer projects across several verticals, including life sciences. Talking about Canapps, now a seniors health company, is a leading advisory and operational services provider to the global life sciences industry. Headquartered in the UK, the company has over 650 employees located in Europe, India, and the US. Founded by professionals from the biopharmaceutical sector, the company provides its services across the full clinical and commercialization lifecycle. The company collaborates with its clients to improve the lives of patients through a unique advise, build, and operate delivery model. So, all right, that was a quick overview of both the companies. Now let me invite Alan to take it forward. Alan?
Okay, great. So we're going to start off with the basics here. I apologize for those of you who already know a little bit about RPA. I don't mean to offend you, but I just want to make sure that we're all on equal footing before we go forward. So RPA, or Robotic Process Automation, is something that has actually been around for quite a while, but it's picking up a lot of momentum right now because companies are realizing that as they look to invest money in growing their business and increase their profitability, that RPA can be not just a key way of doing that, but also can be the door to larger initiatives. And the way that it does that is that RPA, unlike what you might think in picturing robotic process automation in your mind, it doesn't involve actual physical robots. It's about software robots that are doing operations that are typically done by humans, so that those humans can then be freed up to do higher value tasks that only they can do. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. But first, quick look at what analysts are saying about RPA. As I said, many companies are very much on board with RPA. It's not just something that's being talked about, but it's something that companies are actually investing in and doing. You could see there it says that Gartner expects quarterly growth of 20 to 30%. Deloitte is projecting a $5 billion market by 2020. And McKinsey is also looking at large growth rates. So all the metrics are showing that not only is it big, but it's going to continue to grow over time. So just taking a quick look at what are some of the benefits that are drawing many businesses to RPA at this point. One is having a bot or a computer do the work that's typically done by a human results in a much more accurate end product. Now, obviously, we're all humans. We know that humans are error prone, whereas machines are not. Now, we know that it's possible for machines to make a mistake when they've been programmed incorrectly, or we're asking them to do the wrong things, or there's some misunderstanding between what we think we told them to do and what we've actually told them to do. But in terms of, are they going to do what is programmed to be done every single time the same way, they will, unlike a human. They also, they don't get tired. They don't have to have set working hours. You don't have to pay them overtime. So there's a lot of benefits there. Again, consistent output, productivity. We've already talked about the reliability, being able to run 24/7. Also, cross-training a bot to do multiple tasks is much easier than cross-training a human to do multiple tasks, and they will be able to do the second task just as easily as the first task and be able to flip between them with no lag time in terms of being able to get up to speed on the new thing. RPA shows a very rapid ROI as compared to projects done with traditional development. Usually it's something that you can see in quarters or more quickly. And this is why many companies look at RPA as a way to start off their digital transformation initiatives, because many companies are sold on the idea of doing digital transformation, but they have a hard time committing to large investments in it until they're able to get some idea of what the return is going to be. And many companies are using RPA as a way to get an idea of what the return will look like, because it's very easy to take a small scale project with a small investment and in a short amount of time show a measurable ROI that then you can project up to what the return might be when you look at larger scale projects. So as I said, many companies are using RPA in this way to be able to sell the idea of digital transformation or process automation more specifically within their organizations to their key business stakeholders. RPA is also very easy to build as compared to traditional development methods. The RPA interface, especially as we look at Nividus RPA, we've built our development interface around the idea of spreadsheets. So any technically astute business user that's already familiar with how Microsoft Excel works should have no problem in being able to develop and maintain an automated process in Nividus RPA, because it's a very similar interface where once you learn the functions that are built into it and how to apply them, it's very easy to, like I said, not just build, but also maintain those automations over time. The next thing, operational agility, being able to take processes that are not at all integrated and stitch them together in a way that not only can they seamlessly move from one step or one process to the other, but you can also manage them all from a high level through the same interface, where you can get management visibility into things where there was nothing previously. Many of these processes when you start off are more ad hoc in nature, and maybe it's just something in the heads of the people that are accomplishing the tasks, and there's nothing written down anywhere. But automating it through RPA gets it to the point where it's documented and can be monitored through the dashboards to really not just for managing it operationally, but also to optimize it where you see bottlenecks, they will become more apparent than it is when it's just an ad hoc process. The other advantage is that you're automatically getting a full audit trail of all the steps that are accomplished. So you'll be able to see what steps are completed at what time by what bot. And this is great for industries where there is a lot of regulation and compliance that has to be dealt with as we're talking about today. Let me move on to just kind of a high level architecture of Nividus RPA. And for those of you who have looked at other RPA products, this will not be surprising to you because we are configured in the same way as many of the other popular RPA products out there. So there are three components to our system. The first is the studio, which is the development environment. Here is the area where the automations are developed. As already mentioned, it's a spreadsheet metaphor for the development. So there's a set library of functions that you use in order to develop the automations, and it's very easy to configure them as well as the variables that are used to control them. And if that doesn't make sense to you, we certainly are happy to provide a product demo of this at some point in the future if it's something that you're interested in, and that will help to cement this in place for you as to how the studio is really working. The other thing to keep in mind about the studio is, although I talk about a set library of functions, that is extensible. So if there are cases where you're looking to do something that's not already built into the standard product, that product can be extended fairly easily by any knowledgeable Java programmer. But that's really the only thing where programming knowledge is involved. So the first component, studio, as I said. The second component is the control center. This is where everything is monitored, deployed, and controlled and scheduled. This gives you a nice single pane of glass view into everything that's happening. This can also be integrated with other products that you might be using for similar purposes in the automation space. For example, if you're using some kind of BPM product, that's a popular thing that could be combined in this area into a single control center interface to monitor both of those kinds of automations that are running in your enterprise. And then the final piece of it is the bots themselves that are out there actually doing the work. And one popular question that comes up that I'll just deal with right now is that the bots are operating on an independent machine, but it does not have to be a physical machine. It can be a virtual machine, but it's important both from an audit trail perspective, but also from a systems perspective, that the bot be operating on a machine of its own in the same way a human doing that task would be, because then they're using a particular login that's designed for them, and you get that full audit trail that you're looking for. And as we know, not all systems are created equally, so there are some systems that could get confused if there were multiple bots operating on a single machine. So it's just best to have them running on their own independent machines. So that's really all I wanted to go through from an RPA overview perspective. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to John, who's going to walk you through how this all applies in the life sciences space.
Thank you very much, Alan, and good afternoon, everybody, or good morning if you're in the US. Synapse is involved in quite a number of projects and programs where RPA is a component. And so what I've done is just prepared a couple of quick slides on some challenges in life sciences, and then how RPA is addressing those. And then I've got a few case studies just to try to bring that to life. So do remember that you can ask questions through the webinar at any time. So life sciences, I've been in life sciences for nearly 30 years, and one of the big success stories, I think, is that we moved in the last 20 years from making sort of individual submissions and waves of submissions many years apart to almost multiple global simultaneous submissions. And what that's done is it's created this huge blob of work where all of these marketing authorizations now have to be maintained. And so there's quite a bit of research into how much money companies are actually spending in this life cycle maintenance piece. So, renewals and variations and, CMC changes and labeling and stuff. And it's estimated that 70% of the resources of regulatory functions are being spent there. And if you think about those tasks, quite a lot of those tasks are not very high, strategic tasks. They're actually high volume, low complexity, quite repetitive things. So that's one thing that we see. So this very large bolus of work in lifecycle management. Another thing we see is actually there's quite a revolution now in the RIM, the regulatory technology landscape. But for many years, these systems have existed as silos, and we see a very little, master data, a lot of multiple data entry. Systems that just don't talk to each other. Your content management doesn't talk well to your publishing, doesn't talk well to your registration management, and so on. There has been an evolution clearly in the last few years with the rise of some of the suites, but it's still pretty common to encounter major companies where their regulatory systems are very disparate and in silos. In outside regulatory, and I'm really going to focus today on regs and PV. In PV, case volumes are growing exponentially, and maybe 20% of the year is not exponential, but many of our clients are now reporting over 1 million spontaneous adverse events per annum. And I think the rise of monitoring, social sources, patient websites, disease forums and things, that's only going to drive the volume even higher. And if you think about that process, while there's a lot of work going on in that space in terms of technology, it's still a very manual process. So, those of us who've been in the industry a long time know that the CFO is always relentlessly looking for at least 5% per annum and sometimes more in terms of cost savings across the board. And I think the other big challenge that we see is that companies are moving now to very different operating models. So really looking to put flexibility and scalability into their functions. So some stuff is in-house, some stuff is offshore, things are in captives, things are in strategic partner delivery centers and so on. And so, while a lot of that is leveraging labor arbitrage and getting the right resource in the right time zone, that's adding complexity to processes because they're getting disaggregated, and the technology that we're using, may not be up to the task of actually supporting these more flexible, decentralized operating models. So, those 5 things are playing into my thinking about where we can use RPA. And Alan, if you could move to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. And so, as we think about RPA, actually, and Alan mentioned this, we often see RPA being used in combination with other tools, and particularly, Alan said BPM. You could really just say workflow if you like. And that can have a very positive impact. And I've got a case study in a minute on CMC changes, which really demonstrates that. The other thing is, RPA, as Alan said, is not new. It may be new to many of us in life sciences. We do occasionally find ourselves on the back end of the curve when it comes to technology adoption. But many of these digital technologies have been proven for many years in other industries, banking, financial service, insurance. I've listed there. I have a rule of thumb that says, the propensity to innovate is inversely proportional to the gross profit margin. And so industries like, the ones listed here have got small margins, and therefore incremental gains are important. Conversely, industries with pretty large margins like pharma tend to be less innovative. Now, that may be slightly controversial, but it does seem to play out. The other thing that you see a lot of in pharma still is what I guess you could briefly describe as a swivel chair operation. So you can think about that in safety and regulatory. There's a lot of people processing data from forms and mailboxes and all these multiple data entries I was talking about. And call it swivel chair because you sit looking at one screen and then you swivel around and you do the same thing on another screen. So very low value tasks that are being done by pretty highly trained individuals. And then I think one of the things in RPA that we're really excited about is not the kind of 100% RPA. I mean, some of that swivel chair stuff can be completely automated, but I'm actually really interested in, and I have a use case on where RPA can be used to partially do some things, and then humans can then take that process on. And so as we look for these efficiencies and as we look for cost savings and we look to have more flexible operating models, if we can increase the amount of automation in any process, if a process is 0 to 100, and we can start off automating the first 25, and then based on the feedback, the next 25, and the next 10, and so on, we can do a huge amount more work with the same resources. So in that world of 70% lifecycle maintenance, if we could even partially automate some of these tasks, then that would be really useful. And again, just to reinforce what Alan said, this is not complicated system integration and pushing data into systems and all of that stuff. This is a simple concept of, instead of a human user, we have a software user, and that software user has a username and password and can be completely audit trailed. But the other challenge when I talked about disaggregated systems is some of the systems in our environment have very poor APIs, and so even if you wanted to do a kind of an MDM integrated architecture type solution, you could well be hampered just simply by the architecture of some of these old systems. And so having instead of integrating systems, imagine having a bot or a number of bots that literally just move data from one place to another rather than integrating. Actually, very cheap way of doing that. So what I'm going to do now, I just want to know whether this is a topic that resonates with you. So I'm going to pop two polls up on the screen, and I would ask you, please, to react to them. And this first one, you can choose multiple. I think I'll try anyway. Oh no, actually no. I think the first one is a single. So let me just pop this up the screen. And it would be great if you could vote. And we'll leave this going for about 30 seconds. I mean, we can see when people are voting. So we're trying to work out, have you got RPA in production right now? Or are you doing some pilots? Or have you got no pilots, but maybe you have plans in the next 12 months? Or are you at the, I don't have any plans phase? So let's leave that open. We can see some of the votes coming in there. We have pretty much everybody. Oh no, I was getting very close there. I was about to say everybody is in the planning, but we seem to have a pretty 50-50 split now between proof of concepts and planning. So I think that's yeah, it's probably more now 1/3. Oh, we got some people in production. So I think what I see from that is, and I don't think we need to pop that up on the screen. I don't think there's any real value in that. But what I'm seeing from the results is, a small number actually in production, Most people are either in the planning or the POC. I'm delighted that nobody is selected. We have no plans, because that would be rather depressing. So, okay, and then let me just ask you this one more question. Thank you for those who are replying. There's one more question. Is this one? So, if you are doing it or planning to do it, which of these areas are you planning to do it in? Regs, PV and safety, somewhere else in R&D, or non-R&D, like it's going on somewhere else, like in supply chain or somewhere like that. So again, we can watch that coming through. There's quite a push in regs, which obviously is pleasing. Regs, big time in regs. Maybe you're not allowed to select more than one. So I don't see anybody coming through in safety, which is quite interesting. Oh, the minute I say that, something comes through in safety. Maybe my screen is not refreshing. So again, there's probably a little more than half going on somewhere in R&D and the rest outside. So I mean, that's pretty cool. So thank you very much for that. I think I'll close that down. So so let me just quickly go through. Let me quickly go through the next few slides. So next slide, please, Alan. So a use case. Automation of PV data entry. I alluded to this before. So, very manual task. And now I know there's many vendors out there building amazing automation solutions, and these are fantastic. And I really look forward to when they arrive. But I think there's a huge amount of immediate benefit. And Alan talked about ROIs in months rather than in years. To taking some of these data entry tasks, where the inputs are forms like SIOMS forms or something coming from a call center in a form that isn't electronic today. Well, a bot is a fantastic way to monitor a mailbox, take a piece of structured content, and then enter data into a system. And even if you have a plan to go to some amazing, automated solution in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that's still okay. Because if you've got an ROI of 3 to 15 times of productivity benefit that you can realize in a few months, that's worth doing while you wait for the big solution. So, a lot of digital innovation, I think, needs to be done in small steps, and we don't always have to boil the ocean. And I think some of these automated data entry tasks are ideal targets. So that's one. Alan, the next one, please. So the next one's actually 3 slides, and those of us who work in regulatory affairs will know that CMC change control is a huge thing in lifecycle management, and certainly our clients do many thousands of CMC changes every year, and the structure of these changes tends to be that one change initiated in manufacturing can affect 20, 50, 100 different marketing authorizations around the world. So it's even any one change is very complex. It relies on central regulatory, regional regulatory, local regulatory. We need to connect with manufacturing systems. We need to connect with quality. We need to connect with supply chain. So where you have a process, and Alan, if you just flick to the next slide, and I don't expect anyone to be able to read this slide, but where you have a process that involves multiple points where data is required in more than one place, then that is a target for an RPA bot. So in this situation, in this particular one, there's a COE type central function that's getting all this feedback back from various parts of the world, and the COE is entering data in the registration tracking system, as well as entering it into the TrackWise or the change control system, as an example. So that's humans doing that. Well, we could have bots doing that. And if you just flick to the next slide, there's just a similar example in this very high level piece. And so again, this is all this is a stylized CMC change control, and you can see just in this stylized workflow that there are multiple target areas where a human is usually entering the same things in multiple systems. And Alan talked earlier about combining this with tools like BPM. that would make a big difference, because you could map the whole process end to end and track it using BPM, and then use a bot, a robot, at the right stage of the BPM process to actually do this automation. And I know I'm on the half hour now, but I only have one more. Alan, if you could flick to the last one. And the last one is this idea that we could partially do stuff. So we have an ongoing project where we're looking at registration renewals. And if you flick to the next slide, I think there's a nice picture. Imagine that you've got to do the renewal for a product X in country Y, and you have a database or a spreadsheet of the requirements. You know when that's due. So therefore, a bot could kick off the process. Let's say your process is 90 days before the renewal is due. I need to go into my content management system. I need to create the right binder or folder or virtual document or whatever it is you use. I need to pre-populate that with the previous documents or the most recent documents that match my list of requirements. And then I need to notify the human user that their draft dossier is ready for them to review. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but if you're processing, hundreds or thousands of these in a year, and you can have a bot take the first part of that process and automate some of it, that's a big saving. And the other thing is the quality of the dossier. You'll learn a lot by how good or how bad the kind of collated dossier looks, and that will then give you suggestions of, well, if I could, as an example, make my requirements better, or if I had better naming conventions on my documents, or I had a way that my bot could more easily find the latest version or the current version of something, then that would then actually help me to automate my process. So again, an incremental approach. If you do a lot of these things, and particularly service providers like Kainas, we do an awful lot of these things for an awful lot of our clients. This can be a big productivity gain. So I think that was my last slide, and I was going to throw it over to questions. So I think that's the last one. Yes, it is. So Rich is here beside me, and he's looking at the questions. I see we have a question about validation. So how would you validate something like this? And I think that's often a question that we get asked generally in digital. I think for RPA, that's probably the easiest answer, because the user is the user in this case is a software user. And as Alan said, what you're doing is you're writing a script effectively that says, in this situation, this is what you do. So in a validation world, you can validate that that script is getting executed. And also, when the bot logs on to the underlying system, the audit trail is there of what that bot did. So I'm not suggesting you call your bots, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, but they all will have numbers or names or something else. So validation is, I think, pretty straightforward for these kind of things. Let's have a look at another one. Could RPA, my current RIM and PV technologies, so it's a question about people concerned about their suboptimal RIM environments, I think, or PV technologies, if we put them all together. I think in that situation, the use of the bot, where maybe by suboptimal you might mean that these are old architecture, and maybe we're back to that point that we mentioned before, that we can use the bots to actually avoid the need for APIs. So as you as you decide to evolve your underlying RIM or PV technology, then clearly you can change what that bot is doing, so that if it was using one safety database this week and you decide to migrate to a different one, then obviously you just update the script and it uses another one. Let's have another look here. Another one about in combination. Can we use this in combination with other technologies to solve complex problems? I mean, yes. I mean, that might be alluding to the fact that what we've really talked about here is RPA 101, And I think there's some very clever technologies that once we get RPA established in this way, the ability to add machine learning could be could be really valuable. I think the other thing, and I mentioned it before, was BPM, using it in combination with BPM. Please provide the pain areas in HR and finance, particularly to life sciences companies are facing. Yeah, I'm not really an expert in HR and finance, but I would say if HR and finance are processing large volumes of things, then in that same manual way, then I would imagine that's equally valuable. So I would imagine, for instance, you probably have new starter processes in HR where you kick off a workflow, and maybe some people have tools to do that, I don't know, but you need to create your email and your Active Directory, and then you need to do your entries in your HR system and notify payroll and blah, blah, blah. So I think there might be use cases there. When it comes
Yeah,
to
John, I could actually jump in on that real quick,
please.
because I think what you're saying is exactly right. In HR, especially, one of the attractions for using RPA is just what you alluded to, that there are a number of systems that are being used, and a lot of those systems are web-based and don't have APIs. So RPA becomes a perfect technology to glue those together.
Okay, there's a few questions in there, Alan. Can you see them on the actual underlying software for Nividus? Do you want to take those?
Yeah, so I can sum this up by saying there's a lot of questions being asked specifically about Nividus RPA or the underlying technology. So Nividus RPA is a standalone product that has also we've done integrations with various other BPM platforms that are out there. So it can be run either as a standalone or in combination with another tool if that works best for your enterprise. But it's not relying on some other RPA product under the covers. There is no Blue Prism or UiPath or automation anywhere. It's its own product running on its own. And I think, we could get into more details on that separately if you'd like. One of the key differentiators between Nividus RPA and some of the other more popular programs that you might have heard more about is scalability. We've seen a lot of companies that have embraced RPA and done a handful of projects that have become very successful. But then when they look to scale the program across their enterprise, they realize that the combination of the licensing costs and the cost of the hardware required to run it all becomes cost prohibitive. And so we're able to scale much more easily across an enterprise. And because of that, a number of companies are looking to us as a strong alternative to other RPA products out there.
And I think it'd be fair then, for balance, for me to say, whoever asked those, I can see a number of these questions collectively. From my perspective, the use cases that I've described are agnostic to whatever technology you want. I mean, clearly, we are partnering with Nividus to do a number of things, and we're very happy with that partnership. But if you happen to have other tools that your IT function have already purchased, UiPath or Blue Prism or whatever it is, these use cases are the same, right? So while we'd obviously love you to be working, with Kynapse and or Nividus, it's fine. So you do what you want. I mean, there's somebody asking about finance. Again, I know you asked about HR earlier, but I mean, finance again is not an area that I know hugely well, but I would say if you go back to Alan's checklist of, is it high volume? Is it low complexity? Is it easy to describe what the process is? Then yeah, I've actually seen some interesting things where companies are using bots actually doing report writing. I know other companies are approaching that using natural language generation, but actually just using a bot to take all the facts and figures that you need in a finance report and actually filling that out into a sort of a boilerplate, written text is something that can be done. But if you're doing multiple data entry in finance, I don't know, you could do that. And then there's something about, do we partner with other consulting companies? I don't know who you mean by we, but if you mean that to Alan, I'm sure Alan will answer that he will partner with anybody. I'll let Alan take that one.
Yeah, definitely. So,
Definitely.
from a Nividus RPA perspective, if some of you are consultants yourself, we certainly are willing to partner with you. We also have a reseller program available for the Nividus RPA product.
And from Kynapse's perspective, I mean, we are a consulting company, an operations company, but we understand that sometimes partnering is a very good way. So if whoever asked that, if you think we have particular process skills and you have particular technology skills and you want to come together as a partnership, that would be all fine too. So, like I said, we have a partnership with Nividus and we're very happy working with them, but, we work with lots of partners in lots of areas. I think, Shelley, we're up against the time.
Oh, yes. So we can end the session and we can take up the unattended questions later. We will answer them via email. So thank you, John and Alan, for such an informative session. I hope all the attendees, you have enjoyed the session. And definitely we are going to email the recording of the webinar shortly.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Alan. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.